Gudra.
Yeah, I really like this from Nicole. Some shenanigans going on there, I think, with Comfy being able to activate potential weakness policies all over the place, whether that's Lapras or Gudra. Not so much Magnezone, but all three of those Pokemon could be holding that ever-threatening item, and something that's been really showcasing itself in the current format. Guillermo, though, sporting something that we haven't seen too much of, which is a rain mode, abusing that swift swim ability from Kingdra, but also has that little bit of a double-ended team option to go for a Trick Room with Ferrothorn and Sylveon, alongside, of course, Dusclops, who we've seen so many times setting up that Trick Room, but also maybe some shenanigans going on with Ally Switch in this game.
Yeah, so having the Comfey on Nicole's side, it usually does indicate a weakness policy somewhere, and we'll have to see if that's an option that she's been going for. But she is going to be leading with that Comfey alongside the Magnezone, and Guillermo's going to be leading with a Ferrothorn and Dusclops.
So Guillermo going straight for that Trick Room mode here. Ferrothorn loves to be going fast, as well as being one of the more bulky Pokemon on the field. Gotta be watching out for that Magnezone, though, in some way that, you know, both of these Pokemon facing up against each other, being Steel type, not known for being able to damage each other too much, but Magnezone not wanting to stay on the field for too long.
Switching into that Gudra instead, which does have the potential for the Sap Sipper to resist the grass moves from the Ferrothorn, but it looks like the Comfey just went straight for a side draining kiss into the Gudra and did activate that weakness policy on the Gudra. Ferrothorn's going to be following up with a body press into the Gudra, going to be able to hit it for a little bit of damage, almost bringing it down to half HP, and Dusclops is going to be setting up that Trick Room.
Yeah, Trick Room on the field, making Ferrothorn and Dusclops probably faster than Comfey and Gudra on Nicole's side of the field, but Comfey does have that ability Triage, which allows all of its healing moves to gain +3 priority. What that means for this situation is Comfey is likely to be going first regardless of the speed stats of the Pokemon on the field. And so if it's going for something like Floral Healing, would be able to bring that Gudra back up to full health before Guillermo is able to attack it, and that means that Guillermo is actually, even though he's the fastest two Pokemon on the field, maybe a little bit on the back foot here.
And didn't do too much damage with that body press from the Ferrothorn, so that might be why Guillermo has decided to go for a Dynamax with that Ferrothorn, being able to threaten some big max moves, being able to threaten the Comfey a lot with a max Steel Spike as well. And we'll have to see if Nicole is going to be matching that Dynamax with the Gudra, and it looks like she will be. She wants to be making use of that weakness policy boost and being able to fire off some really, really big boosted max moves coming out from the Gudra, which does usually have access to Flamethrower, so that could be very, very threatening for this Ferrothorn going into this turn. And like you said before, the Comfey would be able to get a priority Floral Healing into the Gudra if it does have access to that, and it looks like that is going to be the option of choice for the Comfey, going for that Floral Healing, going to be boosting that Gudra's HP almost back up to full HP. The Dusclops is going to be firing off a Nightshade into the Comfey, breaking that Focus Sash that we saw at Frist on that first turn, and the Ferrothorn is following up with a Max Steel Spike, which now that the Focus Sash has been broken is easily going to be able to pick up the knockout on that Comfey, boosting up the defenses of the Ferrothorn and the Dusclops as well. But that Gudra is known to be a special attacker, so that Max Steel Spike defense boost might not come into play here, and we're going to be seeing that Max Flare coming from the Gudra, boosted by that weakness policy, is going to be doing a huge amount of damage to that Ferrothorn, but it is able to survive that attack.
Yeah, really impressive there from the Ferrothorn, being able to survive that Max Flare. Not going to be able to take another one, even though it was boosted, but definitely a good position for Guillermo to get himself into. One of the problems with Gudra, one of the main issues, is that it's so bulky, especially after... as well as being a threat after that weakness policy. So, you know, you have to be able to knock out that Gudra in this position. So Guillermo wants to first remove Nicole's way of healing the Gudra. Now he's got the opportunity to focus on taking down the Gudra. He's got to do it in front of the Rillaboom that Nicole's brought in, but actually, really, the big threat on the field is Gudra, and Guillermo has the opportunity now to really double down, I think, and try to dispatch it before it does too much damage.
Well, the Rillaboom is going to be switching straight back out into the Magnezone and is going to be activating a Grassy Seed, it looks like, on that Magnezone. So going to be boosting the defenses even further on that Magnezone, and it is going to be burned by a Will-O-Wisp coming in, and going to be doing a little bit of chip damage to that Magnezone, break a potential Sturdy on the Magnezone as well, and Frothorn is going to be firing off a Max Steel Spike into the Goodra, and really not doing too much damage, even though it is a physical attack going into the weaker defenses of the Goodra, still really able to shrug off that attack. And the defenses are being increased once again on the Frothorn and the Dusclops, but now that the Goodra is following up with another Max Flare, and Frothorn is not going to be able to take that one.
And you said, Jamie, earlier in the match that Nicole favours a more defensive playstyle, and we saw a real example of that. Also a bulky playstyle. That Goodra didn't take too much damage at all, but some really nice things happening there for Nicole in that turn. Bringing in the Rillaboom, activating the grassy terrain, making sure Goodra was recovering a little bit of health every single turn for the rest of the game, but also bringing that Rillaboom straight out into Magnezone and activating the item on Magnezone, which was that Grassy Seed, raising its defense and stopping it from being so threatened in the future. Although not sure that Grassy Seed, looking at Guillermo's team, is going to be too impactful for the rest of the match.
Not facing down a Sylveon, which is going to be a special attacker. The Flash Cannon is going to be fired off into the Sylveon, doing just over half HP, and it looks like Goodra was able to dodge an attack there from coming out from the Sylveon, and the Goodra was able to fire off a Max Ooze to finish off that Sylveon after that Flash Cannon. So my Spanish isn't that great. Possibly a Hyper Beam going into the Goodra. That would be a move that could have missed the Goodra there, but the Sylveon wasn't able to do any damage, and Magnezone and the Goodra were able to take out that Sylveon.
Yeah, it was Hyper Beam there going into the Goodra, and really unfortunate for Guillermo that missed. But given that Goodra's still in its Dynamax form, as well as being able to have that really sky-high special defense stat, may not have even knocked it out. We don't know, and maybe we won't know going into the rest of the match. But that Sludge Bomb, Max Ooze coming out from Goodra is going to be really quite impactful for the end game. Goodra now at 3 stages of increased special attack, and Magnezone being at 1 stage of increased special attack. This Incineroar is going to have to do so much work on Guillermo's side of the field to be able to finish off Nicole's side of the rest of Nicole's team. And Nightshade coming out from Dusclops is going to do a lot of damage, but it will take a lot of time to dispatch Nicole's Pokemon.
Well, Nightshade is going to be chipping away at that Goodra, and Body Press is going to be coming out from the Magnezone, but thanks to that burn, it's not actually going to be doing too much to the Incineroar, and Incineroar is going to be going for a Throat Chop here to finish off the Goodra, and now that's taken off Nicole's side of the field. She's going to have to be bringing in that Rillaboom, and now Guillermo's got an Incineroar facing down a Magnezone and a Rillaboom in the sun.
He has indeed, and that Grassy Seed that was activated earlier in the game by Nicole is definitely going to pay dividends here. Rillaboom coming in now for Nicole, and we'll have to see what this Rillaboom's moveset is. It could hold potentially high horsepower, which would significantly damage Incineroar, especially with a little bit of Flare Blitz recoil. Could be a real threat, and also depends on what item that Incineroar is running. A lot of Incineroar do opt for things like Citrus Berry, Super Citrus, so to speak, with their Agua and Ayapapa berries, but it is just a fake out coming out from that Rillaboom.
Wanting to put a stop to those fire moves that could come out from the Incineroar, and going to be following up with a Thunderbolt into the Incineroar, and thanks to that increased stage of special attack from the Goodra's Max Ooze, doing a huge amount of damage to the Incineroar, not activating any berries, but the Incineroar is now dangerously low, but the Dusclops was able to set up that Trick Room once again.
Do you think this is potentially in range for a Grassy Glide here, Jamie?
Oh, it'd be very close. It depends on how the Rillaboom would be trained as well. We know how strong that Grassy Glide can be in the grassy terrain, but Incineroar is going to be resisting it as well, so it would be very close.
Would be very close indeed, and I think that's the real threat. If this Incineroar goes down before the Trick Room, or before it's able to attack again, going to be very difficult for Nicole to knock it out efficiently without taking too much damage.
And there was no Grassy Glide at all. Instead, the Dusclops is just going to be firing off that Will-O-Wisp into the Rillaboom, but it seems like Magnezone is going to be slower than the Incineroar, being able to attack it first in that Trick Room and going to be able to finish it off with another Thunderbolt, as the Rillaboom is going to be knocking off that Eviolite from the Dusclops. And now Dusclops has to take on this Rillaboom and this Magnezone, and yeah, I think Nicole's probably got this one.
Quite possibly, but that Dusclops does have 2 stages of increased defense, or 3 stages of increased defense. So certainly if Guillermo's able to dispatch that Magnezone without taking too much damage, maybe it has access to moves like Pain Split to help it recover some health. Could be we see a long drawn out game where the Dusclops is just able to out damage the Rillaboom and the Magnezone over the course of the match.
Well, firing off another Nightshade to do consistent damage to the Magnezone. But yeah, that Maxu still coming into play for that Magnezone, being able to do over half damage to the Dusclops after its Eviolite had been knocked off. So Magnezone just needs to be able to fire off one more Thunderbolt to take out the Dusclops.
Yeah, very likely that it's going to get it. Nightshade is a move that does consistent damage to their opponent, and yeah, we saw how much the Nightshade did. There's no variation here, no critical hits, no opportunity there. So Guillermo knows that. He's gone for the forfeit. We're going to take the first game to Nicole and go straight into game 2 of this top 4 match.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to see whether the Goodra would have been knocked out to that Hyper Beam from the Sylveon. We know it isn't the Assault Vest variant because it did have that weakness policy as well, so not having the sky-high special defense, just its natural special defenses, which are significantly high as well.
They are very significant, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe if the Hyper Beam would have been able to take out that Goodra, Guillermo would have still had access to his Sylveon, even though it would have been recharging after that Hyper Beam turn. May have been what Guillermo needed to be able to take the match.
I think the difficulty really is that the defensive synergy is so good within Nicole's team. You know, you can always switch out. There's not many, if you've got the Sylveon out and you're threatening the Goodra from Guillermo's side of the field, then you can always bring in that Magnezone. If you've got the Incineroar on the field and you want to launch a Flare Blitz into Magnezone, you've got something for that as well. So, I think it's going to be quite difficult for Guillermo to get into a position where he's able to freely attack. He almost wants to do a similar thing maybe to what he's done in this game and allow Nicole to set herself up so she's less likely to switch out, and Guillermo's more able to land those hits without Nicole just adapting to the position that's on the field.
We also saw the Magnezone moving first in the Trick Room as well, so maybe Guillermo needs to be more wary of setting up the Trick Room with the Dusclops. He does have access to that fast rain mode, but the Kingdra doesn't look too effective against a lot of Nicole's teams, so maybe too wary of going for that. But then if Guillermo does go for that Trick Room mode, there is still just that Magnezone waiting for Nicole.
Absolutely. Without further ado, we are going to see what these players have selected. So going into game 2, we are 1-0 up to Nicole at the moment, and Comfey and Goodra are launching onto the field for Nicole. Same as last game with Sylveon and Dusclops, a little bit of a mix-up from Guillermo's side of the field going into turn 1.
Being able to threaten down that Goodra a lot more with the Sylveon immediately now. Nicole doesn't have to switch in the Goodra to be able to activate the weakness policy. She could just go for the Side Draining Kiss and attack on the same turn this time, rather than having to switch out that Rillaboom into the Goodra. So the Goodra would be able to threaten good damage immediately now.
It certainly can, but
it's just
not going to threaten any damage at all this turn. It's going to be switching straight back out into Magnezone, coming in place of Goodra. And we see a Dynamax coming from Guillermo. Not likely to be the Dusclops going for the Dynamax here, so probably the Sylveon going into its Dynamax form and going to be threatening some really big damage from its max moves coming out here. So we'll have to see what it targets. Likely going to be into that Magnezone slot, which does resist the hit. Comfey though going for what looked like a Draining Kiss into Sylveon, doing a little bit of trick damage, and we see the Max Starfall coming out from Sylveon, going into Magnezone, doing some damage but not too much, and activating that Misty Terrain. Not too many status moves on the field at the moment, but could be useful for later down the line. Dusclops though is able to get its Trick Room up without any issues at the moment, and I'm not sure we saw how well this Sylveon and Dust Magnezone matched up in speed and Trick Room.
Yeah, I think we saw the Flash Cannon go first in the last match as well, so the Magnezone could be in the environment it wanted to be. It was able to shrug off that Max Starfall from the Sylveon, and Comfey still on the field to be able to go for a Floral Healing to get it right back up to full HP as well. The Incineroar is going to be something that can threaten this Magnezone with its Flare Blitzes, but the Magnezone is just going to be going on the Dynamax, for the Dynamax this time. The Goodra won't be the option for Nicole instead, and now the Magnezone is going to be able to threaten that Sylveon with some big Max Steel Spikes, and will just be able to be healed straight back up by the Floral Healing. We'll have to see if the Sylveon has any coverage like the Mystical Fire to be able to hit the Magnezone, but if not, the Magnezone's really not going to be threatened this turn, especially after this Floral Healing. It is going to be healing it, hit the Magnezone by a lot, almost back up to full HP once again. And yes, the Magnezone is going to be moving first once again in this Trick Room environment, being able to fire up a Max Steel Spike into the Sylveon, but not actually being able to be a 2-hit knockout on the Sylveon, putting it just above half HP. Going to be raising the defenses of the Magnezone, so it will be able to shrug off the Flare Blitzes a lot more easily from the Incineroar, but a Max Starfall is going to be fired off into the Comfey, doing a really good amount of damage.
It certainly is, and yeah, this Incineroar coming in is going to be in a good position to start trying to do something to the Magnezone, but really that Comfey needs to be removed from the field before Guillermo has an opportunity to take advantage of being able to knock out Magnezone and having the space to do so. Looks like Comfey, though, deciding not to stay in this turn, just switching out for that Rillaboom.
They're going to be overwriting the Misty Terrain here with the Grassy Terrain instead, so going to be increasing the damage output from that Rillaboom, and also activating the Grassy Seed that we saw on that Magnezone, so really going to be able to shrug off any Flare Blitzes coming out from the Incineroar. Sylveon is going to be using its final turn of Dynamax to go for a Max Guard, so that it avoids this Max Steel Spike that was going to be hitting it, which would have increased the defenses even further of the Magnezone, but it's not going to be stuck at 2 stages of increased defense instead, and Incineroar is not going to be going for a Flare Blitz into this Magnezone. Instead, it's going to be reducing its damage output with that parting shot.
Yeah, I really like that parting shot coming out from Incineroar, and you know, stopping that Magnezone being such a threat. You know, hey, it may be at 2, maybe 3 stages of increased defense by the time it finishes its Dynamax. If we see another Max Steel Spike go into the Sylveon this turn, but you know, it's not going to be doing as much damage, and that's really important for Guillermo to have the time he needs to whittle down Nicole's side of the field. And I think this is what this game is going to end up being a little bit more of. Just a little bit of a whittle down of Nicole's team, make sure that Comfey is removed, try to remove the Grassy Terrain on Nicole's side of the field, or at least wear it out, and then be able to attack at the end of the game.
Well, Sylveon's going to be switching out for the Ferrothorn, would be able to take that Max Steel Spike a lot easier, and it's also going to be able to take this Grassy Glide very easily, probably doing more damage to the Rillaboom than the Rillaboom did to the Ferrothorn with those Iron Barbs. And the Dusclops is going to be going for a Will-O-Wisp into the Magnezone, so setting up to reduce the attack output coming out from the body presses that would be very powerful with those increased stages of defense. And the Magnezone is actually going to be changing the terrain itself, going to be overwriting that Grassy Terrain with the Electric Terrain after going for the Max Lightning there into the Ferrothorn. But Ferrothorn, a fantastic switch here, being able to shrug off both of those attacks coming from Nicole.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. The Iron Barbs doing quite a bit of work, and of course you've got the burn coming out there as well from Dusclops. So that's going to be maybe not so consequential right now, definitely going to work for those body presses as you mentioned, Jamie, but also going to be whittling down Magnezone's health, and could be again really important for later in the match. Goodra though coming out for Rillaboom, wanting to get a little bit of a slice of the action this turn.
Yeah, just avoiding the Rillaboom being burned here. The Goodra's going to take that Will-O-Wisp instead, which won't matter too much as it does rely on its special attack as we've seen. But Knockoff is going to be getting rid of that weakness policy from the Goodra, so Comfey can no longer activate that Goodra's weakness policy. But the Body Press is going to be coming out into the Ferrothorn, and even with that burn is going to be doing very good damage. With the 2 stages of increased defense, is effectively back to neutral damage from the Body Press coming out from the Magnezone, and the Ferrothorn would be in range of another one.
Definitely in range there, and the question is whether this Ferrothorn can protect itself. We've seen a Steel move, we've seen Knockoff, we've seen I'm not sure if we've seen any other moves come out for in the previous game, but you've got to assume there's a grass move in there somewhere. So the question is can that Ferrothorn protect itself from another attack from Magnezone while the Trick Room gets set up by that Dusclops again? Or is it just going to be susceptible to another attack this turn? And really, does Guillermo then lose his main way of taking attacks from Nicole's side of the field?
And if he switches in with either that Incineroar or the Sylveon, Incineroar wouldn't like to take a body press, and Sylveon wouldn't like to take a flash cannon either. But there is no switch outs here. Instead, the Goodra is just going to be firing off that flamethrower to take out that Ferrothorn, easily being able to be taking the knockout on that low HP on the Ferrothorn. Magnezone is going to be going for, it looks like a body press, as the Dusclops wasn't affected at all, so that was going to be a body press, probably covering for the switch in of the Incineroar there. And the Dusclops was able to fire off a Nightshade into the Magnezone, and the Magnezone is looking very damaged here, especially with that burn chipping away at it.
Yeah, I really like this this play here, and I think Guillermo's identified that he needs to take out one Pokemon. You know, if a lot of these defensive teams like Nicole are running, really do rely on that ability to switch, the ability to take their attacks really well, and that's brilliant. But when one piece of the puzzle goes down, you lose the ability to, you know, switch around and take all of those hits, because a lot of the time, and not so much the case with Magnezone and Goodra, certainly not after the weakness policy, but a lot of the time they don't attack so hard, and that's really important. That, you know, once you get on the back foot, it's really hard to work your way back onto the front.
Well, Rillaboom's going to be coming right back onto the front here, overwriting that electric terrain with the grassy terrain once again, and they're going to be threatening fake out pressure onto the Incineroar in the next turn. Magnezone is going to be protecting itself from any attacks coming out from Guillermo's side. And it looks like a Flare Blitz was fired off into that Magnezone from the Incineroar, and the Dusclops is going to be going for that Trick Room once again.
It is, and fake out is going to be a really big threat for the Incineroar here. Magnezone going to be able to launch out another body press if it wants to onto that side of the field. Grassy terrain though, stopping the burn, taking so much damage away from that Magnezone, and Magnezone does look like it's under threat of a Nightshade here, but we do see that fake out, as you said, Jamie, coming straight out into the Incineroar.
And the Nightshade is going into that Magnezone, and not quite enough to take the knockout on the Magnezone. It is able to fire off another Thunderbolt into the Incineroar, not doing too much damage at all, but thanks to that grassy terrain, the Magnezone is going to recover that little bit of HP before that burn is going to be putting it right back down, but able to survive this turn thanks to that grassy terrain.
It is, and yeah, the real question here is, you know, does another knockoff come towards the Dusclops? Is the Incineroar able to just target down that Rillaboom maybe, expecting the Magnezone to come back out? Nicole needs to preserve that resource for later in the match and just keep it around. The question is, you know, can Nicole work herself into a position where Magnezone and Comfey are on the field at the same time, so she can take advantage of that floral healing?
And the Magnezone is going to be protecting itself, so it should be able to make it through this turn, as a Nightshade was fired off into that Magnezone to try and pick up the knockout. Incineroar is going to be going for a passing shot into the Rillaboom, so going to be switching out into that Sylveon, which will be heavily threatened by the Flash Cannon, but the Rillaboom did stay in this turn. It would have to go for a U-turn if the Rillaboom wanted to switch out into that Comfey, but it might also be just going for the knockoff into the Dusclops to get rid of that Eviolite to really reduce the defenses of the Dusclops, but it is actually the U-turn into the Sylveon, so the Rillaboom will be able to switch out, and Nicole still has that Comfey waiting in the back. We are in grassy terrain as well, so the floral healing will be even more effective, and there's no way to stop this Comfey from going for that floral healing because of the huge priority increase of the triage. Even something like a quick attack from the Sylveon wouldn't be able to get that bypass the floral healing before the Magnezone is healed, and Nicole's positioned herself into a really, really good position with that Magnezone now.
Yeah, exactly. And just one other note to add to that, Jamie, was that the Magnezone does go before the Sylveon, as we've seen before. So, you know, maybe even able to knock out the Sylveon before Magnezone takes any more damage than just a Nightshade coming out from the Dusclops.
There is that floral healing. Magnezone, being at such low HP for quite a few turns, is now so healthy once again, able to shrug off this Nightshade with real ease thanks to that healing. And the Magnezone is going to be underspeeding that Sylveon once again, firing off the Flash Cannon, but not able to pick up the knockout on the Sylveon here, which is able to fire off a Hyper Voice and is just enough to knock out the Comfey. And the Magnezone is back down into Nightshade range, so it looked like a really good position for the Magnezone, but the passing shots really coming into play. Even in this late stage in the game, the Sylveon able to survive that Flash Cannon is really crucial, as that Magnezone is once again in Nightshade range.
It is, and more importantly, that Sylveon still has the opportunity to go for Hyper Voice and for potential Hyper Beam into Goodra that's in the back. No worries about activating anything like a weakness policy after the knockoff from earlier in the match. And yeah, this is a really quite precarious situation now for Nicole, where the Dusclops goes down, or the Goodra takes quite a bit of chip damage from Nightshade if it decides to switch in. So, you know, it's really difficult for now Nicole to position herself without that Comfey on the field, able to bring it in for any other attack.
Incineroar's just going to be able to be switched in for the Sylveon, because the Nightshade would be able to threaten the knockout on the Magnezone. Incineroar will be able to shrug off any move that the Rillaboom would want to go for. Sylveon probably would have been in range of a Grassy Glide, but instead the Incineroar is going to be switching in. Magnezone is going to be protecting itself from another Nightshade coming out from the Dusclops, and we'll have to see what this Rillaboom is going to be going for. It looks like another U-turn into the Incineroar, so going to be switching out into that Goodra. The Goodra will be able to match up a bit better against the Incineroar, but the Magnezone is still pinned by this Nightshade.
It is, and you know, certainly you've got the opportunity now that while Magnezone did protect in the last turn, but protect gets more and more likely to fail the more times you use it in a row, and not really very likely that it's going to work 2 times in a row even. So, you know, Guillermo's got the opportunity to just double attack into Magnezone. Either the Nightshade knocks out the Magnezone and some damage goes off onto Goodra, or the Nightshade goes off onto a Rillaboom switch in. Flare Blitz could potentially knock that Pokemon out. And then we'd be back in the same position with Magnezone and Goodra on the field, but with nothing in the back and no way to get away from attacks from Guillermo's side of the field.
Yeah, but I think the Trick Room actually ended this last turn, so the Dusclops would have to set it up once again. It's not really threatened by too much, so it would be able to set up that Trick Room, but Incineroar would probably be able to take the knockout on the Magnezone outside of the Trick Room, but if the Dusclops sets up the Trick Room once again, Magnezone will be able to be threatened by the Nightshade. So Magnezone, it looks like it's still somewhat pinned here, but the Goodra are really not threatening too much damage against Nicole's side of the field without that weakness policy boost. The Magnezone, after sitting on the field for so long, is actually going to be switching out into the Rillaboom now, once again setting up that grassy terrain. I think this is the 3rd time that the Rillaboom is able to set up the grassy terrain in this match, so quite a long and drawn out one. But Fake Out is going to be the move of choice from the Incineroar, not a Flare Blitz going into the Magnezone, going to be stopping that Goodra from moving, and the Trick Room is set up once again from the Dusclops. I think that also the 3rd time that the Dusclops has set the Trick Room.
Yeah, I think we're getting there. But Rillaboom coming in and activating the grassy terrain is going to be really good for actually both sides of the field here. Really just sort of edging out the damage that these Pokemon are doing. And the big question here is, does Fake Out happen again? Does this Rillaboom decide to U-turn out potentially, as it has been the last couple of times that it's come in? Just preserve itself and try to get into that position where Incineroar isn't on the field anymore. Maybe it's not in a position where it's threatened so much by Will-O-Wisp, and can start doing some actual damage.
Well, Incineroar isn't on the field anymore. The Sylveon is, but now it's not, because it was hit by that Grassy Glide. Even with a critical hit, being able to do that last bit of damage to the Sylveon. Dusclops is going to be firing off a Will-O-Wisp onto this Rillaboom. So now all of the Pokemon on Nicole's side are burned and will effectively be cancelling out that grassy terrain recovery. Goodra is going to be firing off a Draco Meteor into this Dusclops and going to be doing a little bit of damage, reasonable damage to a Dusclops. But I think that may have been the first bit of damage that this Dusclops has taken this match.
I think you're right there, Jamie. But that Gudra going down to 2 stages of decreased special attack is going to be quite difficult for it to keep putting on offensive pressure. That Rillaboom's got its attack cut in half by the burn as well. So while there's one less Pokemon in Guillermo's side of the field, that Magnezone in the back isn't too healthy on Nicole's side, and both of the Pokemon on Guillermo's side of the field are going to be having their health increased by the grassy terrain set up by Nicole. And with Nicole having such little offensive presence going on at the moment, you know, it could be in Guillermo's favor at this stage. But, you know, a couple of switches here and there, maybe a U-turn coming out from Nicole could just change all of that and, you know, put her back on the front foot.
Magnezone is going to be switching in for the Gudra as the Dusclops is firing off a Nightshade into that Magnezone, and since it was put at such low HP, Nightshade is able to pick up the knockout on the Magnezone, and Incineroar is going to be following up with a Throat Chop into the Rillaboom. Not Flare Blitz, which should have done a lot of damage to that Rillaboom, but Knockoff is finally going to be fired off into the Dusclops to get rid of that Eviolite. And as you can see, we have had quite a long game. We've got 3 minutes left of this match, but we're down to the last 2 Pokemon on both players' side.
We are, and that Rillaboom has shown Fake Out, Knockoff, Grassy Glide, and U-turn, so no opportunity for Nicole to protect it this turn. So if Guillermo wants to just go for a Flare Blitz straight into that Rillaboom, he will be able to and likely pick up the knockoff, especially in combination with a Nightshade from the Dusclops. And the big thing is that Gudra is coming back in. It's not got any reduced stages of special attack going on anymore. But the question is it going to be able to launch off powerful enough attacks to be able to knock out both Incineroar and Dusclops without using that Draco Meteor and giving itself a stat debuff?
That is going to be the strongest move that could come out from the Gudra. We've seen that it does have Flamethrower and Sludge Bomb at least. So Sludge Bomb, maybe try and pick up a poison on the Incineroar. And yeah, the Dusclops has been knocked off now, so we saw how much the Draco Meteor did before. It will be doing a bit more damage to the Dusclops with the Draco Meteor. Maybe a Grassy Glide and a Draco Meteor would be able to pick up the knockout on the Dusclops. Even though it's so bulky, it doesn't have its Eviolite anymore.
No, it doesn't. But then the trouble that Nicole's got is after that Draco Meteor, definitely going to be relying on some critical hits to keep doing damage to that Incineroar. Grassy Glide there coming out from Rillaboom, not doing too much damage at all, being weakened from the burn. But Nightshade doing what Nightshade does, taking a good amount of chip damage onto that Rillaboom, and Incineroar coming in to finish it off with a big Flare Blitz to take the knockout. And now Nicole's down to only Gudra. So we'll see if that Gudra is deciding to go for that Draco Meteor, which it does, into Incineroar. Does it pick up the knockout? Let's have a look, and not quite. Incineroar just surviving on a little bit of health and a little bit of recovery after that grassy terrain. Yeah, looking like it's going to be in Guillermo's favor now that he's got the Pokemon advantage.
Yeah, and we can see that timer now. Thanks to that grassy terrain recovery, being able to put the timer down below the 45 seconds. And that would allow Guillermo to just take this game by doing nothing now. He doesn't need to input any moves to be able to take out the Gudra. But he would still be able to go for the knockout if he chooses to. The Gudra is probably going to be in range of a Nightshade and a Throat Chop. It'd be reasonably close, but Guillermo now has a guaranteed way of winning, and that's just not inputting any moves.
Yeah, indeed. So, yeah, I mean, the question is, now that we're going into our game 3, not that I want to distract from the end of the match, but what do you think that Nicole needs to do to adjust in the next game, Jamie?
Well, the Magnezone was put into a very good position, but the problem was that it got burned by the Will-O-Wisp, which really reduced the damage output from the body press. It allowed the Ferrothorn to be able to shrug off the body presses as well, and she was able to get one big floral healing off, but it wasn't enough because the Magnezone was once again put into Nightshade range. Maybe she wants to go back to that Gudra strategy, but then she did lead with the Gudra, intending on getting the weakness policy immediately, but then switched straight into the Magnezone. So it's quite an awkward one. It seems like the Trick Room benefits both players, with that Magnezone being slower than everything but the Dusclops and the Ferrothorn. But yeah, it's quite an interesting one with the speed interactions as well, and whether Nicole wants to go for that Gudra once again. The weakness policy got knocked off, so if the weakness policy was activated, maybe the Gudra would have been able to threaten a bit more.
I think it definitely would have been, and I think, you know, if we go back to that turn one you were talking about of game two, really, you know, there was an opportunity there for Nicole to just say, you know what, I've got a Gudra, I'm going to just attack the Sylveon. We did see the Sludge Bomb earlier in the game, and certainly a weakness policy boosted Max Ooze would have done a lot of damage. Would have also increased the special attack of Comfey, which in turn would have given Comfey a way to attack with its Floral Healing. Not Floral Healing, sorry, Draining Kiss a bit more effectively. So, you know, I think there could have been a route where Nicole could have been just that little bit more aggressive, and, you know, taken out one of the primary threats to Gudra quite early. Because of course as well, when you switch your Sylveon out of that Max Ooze, if you need to, you're switching it into Ferrothorn, and then you're under threat from a Max Flare, and we saw how little damage that Max Steel Spike did in return in game one.
Yeah, and the Max Ooze not being one of the strong Max moves, it's capped a lot lower than the other Max moves. Sylveon would probably be able to take the Max Ooze even at the increased stages of a special attack, and it did Dynamax as well, so it would have really been able to shrug it off, and still haven't seen how much damage the Max Starfall or the Hyper Beam would do to the Gudra, as well as the Gudra was switched out immediately into the Magnet Zone. Maybe Nicole just wants to immediately lead with that Magnet Zone, because both times in the first turn of the match she switched out one of the Pokemon that's next to the Comfey to reposition herself. Maybe if she gets the correct Pokemon as the lead, she can just go on the offensive immediately this time to be able to threaten down whatever it's the Pokemon that Guillermo decides to lead with. And it is going to be the Gudra once again into the Sylveon from Guillermo's side, along with that Dusclops. So the Comfey is still going to be able to threaten that weakness policy boost on the Gudra, but we are in the same position as that game two, and Nicole decided that she wanted to switch up her game plan in that game two. But then Guillermo could just read into that and instead expect the Magnet Zone to be coming in instead.
Certainly could be, and you know, I think there's several ways for Guillermo to play. One of which is to play offensively, and the other is to play defensively. Looks like Nicole is playing defensively as well as is Guillermo. Protect coming out from the Comfey as well. Excuse me, and a Protect coming out from the Sylveon. So lots of protecting going on this turn.
Yeah, we just got a switch and Trick Room set up instead by the Dusclops. So the Magnet Zone managed to switch in without taking that Max Starfall that it did in the game two. So looking in a much better position for the Magnet Zone this time, and being able to threaten the Sylveon really heavily with those steel moves as well. We've seen that it moved first almost, I think it was every time against the Sylveon, so almost certainly going to be slower than that Sylveon, and that's why it wants to switch out into that Ferrothorn instead. Being able to take the steel moves from the Magnet Zone a lot better, but no Dynamax going to be coming out from Nicole's side on that Magnet Zone, going to be preserving that Dynamax. Comfey going for a Draining Kiss into the Ferrothorn, but once again, the Iron Barb's doing more damage to the Pokemon that attacked it instead. Flash Cannon is going to be fired off into the Ferrothorn there, and it looks like the Dusclops went for an attack, but it missed, so that's probably a Will-O-Wisp miss there.
It looks that way, and always amusing to me that Draining Kiss is a contact move, and going to be breaking the Focus Sash on Comfey, so a really good turn there for Guillermo. Again, really good switch that has been repeated from game one. No burn could be quite impactful for the rest of the game, and Magnet Zone though deciding that it doesn't want to risk taking another one, switching straight out to Incineroar.
Yeah, and probably that implies that there's no Rillaboom there instead, bringing the Incineroar, which does match up against the Ferrothorn a lot better than the Rillaboom does. But we are going to be seeing a Dynamax coming out from Guillermo's side. Almost certainly going to be going for that Ferrothorn Dynamax, going to be able to take out the Comfey with a Max Steel Spike, but possibly not now that the Incineroar has switched in. There was no Intimidate in the previous game for Nicole's side, so this Intimidate onto the Ferrothorn could be very crucial in allowing this Comfey to survive a Max Steel Spike, if that is what the Ferrothorn has gone for. But the Comfey is going to be protecting itself anyway, so it's definitely going to be able to survive this turn. Dusclops is going to be firing off a Nightshade into the Incineroar switch in, and doing a nice bit of damage to the Incineroar, as the Ferrothorn does fire off that Max Steel, but it is going to be targeting the Incineroar instead, so still not going to be doing too much damage on that switch in with that resisted hit, and the Intimidate going to be very nice for the Ferrothorn, but it still gets that defense boost from the Max Steel Spike, so probably going to be able to shrug off any fire moves that the Incineroar wants to go for.
Yeah, Flare Blitz not likely to do too much damage, especially since we're likely to see another Max Steel Spike before the Flare Blitz comes out from Incineroar. So, you know, that's a pretty nice position for Nicole to be in, and I really like the switch up here, bringing Intimidate and a fire type to absorb those Will-O-Wisps. But Incineroar coming in when Incineroar comes in, you know, this format is no different to others. Intimidate coming out onto Incineroar and Nicole's side of the field, going to be reducing the power of those Flare Blitz even further.
But the Incineroar is going to be healed by that Floral Healing, and it's going to be right back up to full HP with that Incineroar. So even though it was intimidated, it is very healthy once again. And Max Steel Spike is fired off into that Comfey, but thanks to that Intimidate from the Incineroar, it is able to survive that attack. So we'll be able to fire off Floral Healings in the future as well, whether Nicole wants to save that Comfey for the Floral Healings. But the Incineroar is going to firing off a parting shot into the Ferrothorn, being able to reduce its attack and special attack, and being able to pivot out once again. So if that's going to be that Goodra chasing down the Incineroar and the Ferrothorn, the Comfey may be able to activate the weakness policy on the Goodra. But then we are still in the Trick Room, so actually this time you don't usually want to be faking out a Comfey, but in this Trick Room environment, the fake out would be able to stop that Draining Kiss this time.
It would be in one of the only environments that you're able to do that. Of course, Draining Kiss and Fake Out being in the same priority, so would be able to... it does now depend on which one is faster. Of course, Goodra is a really good Pokemon for Nicole to be bringing in here. Attacking on the special side after... Guillermo's Ferrothorn has been boosting up its physical defenses, so that Flamethrower that we saw in Game 1 going to be absolutely crucial and turning into a Max Flare with Goodra going for the Dynamax on this occasion.
Yeah, so going to be matching the Ferrothorn's Dynamax, and we'll have to see if there's going to be that fake out coming out from the Incineroar, but no, the Comfey is able to fire off its Draining Kiss into the Goodra, actually healing a pretty reasonable amount of HP as well from that Draining Kiss, while still activating the weakness policy on the Goodra. So maybe a bit of a missed opportunity from that Incineroar to stop that Draining Kiss with the fake out. But Steel Spike is going to be able to finish off that Comfey and increase the defenses even further of the Ferrothorn and the Incineroar. But like we've said, the Goodra is going to be a special attacker, so that those defense boosts won't really matter at all here. And the Goodra is going to be able to fire off a big max move, but first we're going to be seeing the parting shot going to be reducing that Goodra down a little bit more, so only one stage of increased special attack now, thanks to that parting shot, as the Incineroar is able to pivot out once again, and got the Sylveon waiting in the back that would be able to threaten down that Goodra or go into that Dusclops, as Trick Room would be ending soon if the Guillermo wants to be setting up that Trick Room again in the future. But the Ferrothorn is still going to be threatened by that Max Flare that could come out from the Goodra as well. But we did see in the first game that the Ferrothorn was able to survive that attack. Sylveon is the Pokemon of choice from Guillermo's side, and the perfect choice here, as it looks like a Max Wormwind was fired off into that Incineroar slot, but thanks to that Fairy type switch in, was able to just completely negate that.
Yeah, it was definitely, and exactly as you were saying, Jamie, that Max Flare is definitely going to be a threat to Ferrothorn, but we saw in the first game that it did, maybe 75-80% of Ferrothorn's health when it was in its Dynamax form, and Goodra was at 2 stages of increased special attack. Now it's only at 1 stage of increased special attack. It's going to be doing less damage, and so, maybe that Ferrothorn's going to be able to just take those attacks and launch out some Gyro Balls. And now that Comfey is gone and Nicole's source of Floral Healing is not on the field anymore, could be the time to take it a little bit more on the offensive and try to remove that Goodra from the field.
She also didn't bring the Rillaboom to the match instead, so even that passive recovery from the grassy terrain won't be in play for Nicole's side of the field, and she won't have access to the grassy seed on the Magna Zone either to be able to increase the damage of those body presses and be able to shrug off the attacks coming out from Guillermo's side even more. But it looks like Ferrothorn is going to be switching into the Incineroar here, going to be firing off another Intimidate, which won't matter too much against the Magna Zone, which does rely on its defenses with its physical attacks. But the Sylveon will be able to maybe fire off a Hyper Beam to be able to, so we can see how much damage it would do, but instead it's going to be protecting itself from any attacks that's going to be coming out from the Goodra. It looks like Max Flare was the move of choice into what was the Ferrothorn, but Incineroar able to really easily take that move being able to set up the stun, so the Flare Blitzes will be doing even more damage to the Magnezone again. And Flash Cannon looks like was fired off into the Sylveon, which did protect. So nice positioning for Guillermo's side.
Very nice positioning, and eventually we'll see the Hyper Beam, Jamie. I'm sure of it. I'll just we'll get there eventually. But this is a really great position now that the Magnezone doesn't have its grassy seed in play. That Flare Blitz is going to be doing lots of damage. Goodra's just set up the Sun for Flare Blitz to do even more damage than usual, and so Incineroar is in a lovely position, which in combination with Sylveon's potential Hyper Voice, or if we're lucky, Hyper Beam, would be doing quite a lot of damage to Nicole.
Well, Incineroar is going to be switched in for that Magnezone, going to be resisting it very well, but a Fake Out was just fired off into what was the Magnezone, so not doing too much with the Fake Out here. But Max Ooze is going to be fired off into the Sylveon, doing just over half HP, so would be in range of another Sludge Bomb if the Goodra wants to go for that in the next turn. Going to be increasing its special attack back up to the +2 stages of special attack that it was at before, but that looks like it's going to be a Yawn most likely coming out into the Goodra. So going to be putting that Goodra on a timer, and no Hyper Beam coming out, unfortunately. But Yawn is going to be very effective at putting a stop to that Goodra. You have to switch out the Goodra and waste your special attack increase, or just go on the offensive one more time, but then go to sleep.
You do, and Incineroar on Guillermo's side of the field does decide to switch out for that Ferrothorn in the face of Incineroar, so a little bit of a risky switch there, but another Protect coming out from that Sylveon, so again, not taking any more damage. Draco Meteor, though, coming out into that Ferrothorn, so great switch there from Guillermo. Ferrothorn able to take that like a champ, and not be very effective, while Goodra just lowers its special attack by 2 stages. But a Flare Blitz does come out, not into Protect of Sylveon, but straight into that Ferrothorn. So Nicole seeing the switch coming a mile away, getting that critical hit from Incineroar, but very unlikely that made any difference to the game at all. And that Ferrothorn being knocked out is going to be absolutely fantastic for Nicole going into the next few turns. No more switch-ins for Guillermo, as Goodra decides, you know what, it's been doing a lot of work this game, it's just going to take a nap.
Well, Nicole effectively decided to sacrifice both her boosts and the sleep, as she went for that Draco Meteor to reduce the Goodra back down to neutral, but did also opt to stay in to be put to sleep to that Yawn, and would be threatened very heavily by this Sylveon now. And the Incineroar coming back in for Guillermo's side puts Fake Out pressure once again back onto the field. So if a Fake Out was fired off into Nicole's Incineroar, the Sylveon has free reign of what it wants to do this turn. And I really hope it's a Hyper Beam coming into the Goodra. But Incineroar is going to be switching out into that Magnezone, would be able to resist any Hyper Voices coming out from the Sylveon. And we are going to be seeing that Fake Out come out from the Incineroar on Guillermo's side. And Goodra has to take a turn of sleep here after that Yawn. And Sylveon is just going to be firing off a Hyper Voice. Still going to be doing very good damage to that Goodra, and indicating that it almost certainly would be KO'd to a Hyper Beam. But yeah, the Magnezone is going to be quite a good resist for this Hyper Voice here. But we are still in the sun, we're not in Trick Room, and we saw how slow that Magnezone was as well.
Yeah, and the real question is, how much do you risk your Pokemon? The answer is not too much. Guillermo is deciding to switch his Sylveon out into Dusclops to take all of those hits. Dusclops now not affected by knockoff from Rillaboom not coming to the game. Magnezone, though, deciding to protect itself as well, while Goodra wakes itself up, goes for that Sludge Bomb into the Dusclops slot. But it is resisted, so not too much damage coming out here, as Goodra gets knocked out by Incineroar's Throat Chop. So great knockout there for Guillermo. Goodra finally goes down, and it's now 3 Pokemon to 2.
Yeah, so Incineroar's going to have to come in for Nicole's side of the field. Going to be able to intimidate the Incineroar on Guillermo's side to help protect that Magnezone a little bit better. But since Guillermo still has the Sylveon waiting in the back, Guillermo could just switch out that Incineroar to reset that Intimidate. And the Dusclops now coming in once again is going to be threatening the Trick Room coming out from the Dusclops once again. But maybe you don't want to be going for that if the Magnezone is still going to be threatening that Sylveon. And yeah, we've still got a Fake Out pressure coming onto the Incineroar from Nicole's side of the field instead. So the Magnezone would be able to go for whatever move it would want to go for. this turn if the Incineroar would want to be going for that fake out. But the Incineroar is going to be just straight up switching into the Sylveon as the fake out was fired off into that Sylveon. And the Magnezone is going to be firing off a Thunderbolt into that Sylveon switching, and it's just able to hang on. As the Dusclops doesn't set up Trick Room here, it's just going to be going for a Nightshade into the Incineroar, activating that Citrus Berry on the Incineroar. And yeah, clutch survival on that Sylveon.
Really clutch. Sylveon I think is a little bit dead weight here. Depending on how it's trained, it could be faster than the Incineroar on Nicole's side of the field, but potentially not. So, when a Trick Room goes up, Jamie, you've got then the Magnezone being faster than Sylveon in Trick Room, or you've got the Incineroar potentially being faster than Sylveon outside of Trick Room. So, lots of threats going on there, but one threat to the Dusclops is Throat Chop, and it's doing quite a lot of damage to that. Dusclops' Thunderbolt from Magnezone goes off into the Protect from Sylveon, and Nightshade just does that little bit more chip damage to Incineroar in the cold side of the field.
Yeah, the Incineroar will be in range of 2 more Nightshades here, not opting to set up the Trick Room with the Dusclops as well. Doing a very good amount of damage with the Throat Chop. Interesting that Throat Chop is the dark move of choice on both players' Incineroars here. We've seen Lash Out picking up in popularity a lot more because of that potential increased damage output from that doubling that could happen if stats are dropped. But now we're going to be seeing the Incineroar firing off a Flare Blitz instead into the Sylveon, easily able to pick up the knockout on that 3 HP Sylveon. As we're going to be seeing a little bit of recoil, not putting the Incineroar into Nightshade range yet, but the Thunderbolt is going to be fired off into the Dusclops, going to be doing a nice bit of damage, and Pain Split is going to finally be revealed on that Dusclops, and it's going to be healing pretty much exactly back to where it was before, while still doing a nice bit of damage to the Magnezone, as the Incineroar is going to be able to come in for Guillermo's side, unintimidated now, would really be able to threaten down that Magnezone.
It really will be, and that Flare Blitz is almost certain to be able to pick up the KO on the Magnezone. Magnezone can protect itself, but Incineroar on Nicole's side of the field can't do too much. Maybe launching out a parting shot to lower the attack of Incineroar, but you're probably going to get to 2 of those parting shots before Magnezone isn't in range of any Flare Blitz. And of course, there is always the threat of Nightshade coming out from that Dusclops while you're trying to reduce the attack of Incineroars all over the place at the moment. That's what we're seeing here. Parting shot coming out from Nicole's Incineroar into Guillermo's. Flare Blitz going into the Magnezone, protecting itself, and a Nightshade just finishing off the turn with a little bit more damage to that Incineroar and Nicole's side of the field.
Incineroar is now going to be in range of another one of those Nightshades. Saw how much damage the Throat Chop did before to the Dusclops, so would need to be a critical hit to pick up the knockout on that Dusclops. But even if Nicole was able to do that, Incineroar on Guillermo's side is almost certainly going to be moving before that Magnezone. I have to see if that parting shot was enough to be able to let that Magnezone survive. It's got no Max Steel Spike boost, it's got no Grassy Seed defense boosts, so it'll have to depend on how both of the Pokemon are trained. If the Magnezone is able to survive, it would still be able to fire off 1 big Thunderbolt and maybe enough to turn the tide for Nicole. But if that Magnezone is in range of the Flare Blitz, then there really isn't too much you can do, as the Flare Blitz would be able to take out the Magnezone, the Nightshade would be able to take out the Incineroar. It's really going to come down to whether the Magnezone is able to survive, but it looks like Nicole knows that it would not survive that attack, and she is going to be ending up forfeiting this match, and Guillermo is going to be taking the match for Spain.
Yeah, really well played to both players there, and a really long match as far as Pokemon goes, and it's a testament to the focus of these players to keep playing and go to not just 1 game, not 2 games as we normally see, 3 games occasionally, but a lot of these games were quite long, 10 plus turns, and really that's quite a tiring thing to play in VGC, where every turn you've got to decide on what your game plan is, what, especially in this match, what sort of resources you need to preserve, how much does every move do, all of those little fine margins, all the grassy terrain recovery, all of those little details coming together to form the big picture. So an absolute testament to both players that they got to the end and got it so close to the wire. Guillermo this time managed to edge that just about, but could have been anyone's game up till then.
Yeah, there's many turns in the match, but then you've got to focus on the few key ones like that. Sylveon switching on the Max Wormwinds, being able to waste the turn of the Gudra, the turn of the Floral Healing of the Magnezone, when it wasn't able to take out that Sylveon with the Flash Cannon, it was able to be put right back into Nightshade range. So really, really long drawn out game. But some really nice play coming out from both players here. But Guillermo was just able to squeak out that win.
Yeah, indeed. And a couple of other key turns where we had the Flare Blitz coming out into that Ferrothorn switch from Nicole's side of the field as well. So, it's really interesting.